What happens when a narcissist believes nothing can touch them anymore? What unfolds when someone treats harm as a joke, convinced that consequences are only for other people? There comes a moment when the atmosphere around their life begins to shift. Slowly at first, like a quiet wind moving through still trees, something begins to rearrange itself in the unseen places. And the one who laughed at the pain of others becomes unaware that a storm is already forming around them before this journey begins. It is a blessing to know from which part of the world you are watching, and at what hour of the day God has guided you to this message. Truly, it is a joy to witness how the Lord gathers hearts from every corner of the earth, uniting them in one spirit and in one truth. There are seasons when a narcissist appears untouchable. Their voice is loud, their presence demanding, their confidence overflowing. They speak as though nothing can break them, nothing can challenge them, nothing can expose them. But even the strongest walls tremble when truth begins to move. Even the most polished masks crack when light starts pressing through. Sometimes, the shaking begins so quietly that no one notices it at first. A small disruption, a broken plan, a door that unexpectedly closes. And yet, beneath every small interruption lies something deeper, something preparing to reveal that arrogance has a limit. Pride has a boundary. Manipulation has an expiration date. The scriptures speak of this quiet work. In the book of Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1, faith is described as the assurance of what is hoped for and the evidence of what is not yet seen. This same unseen world holds the turning points that narcissists never prepare for. While they celebrate their power, something invisible begins to shift. While they mock the pain they caused, something in the spiritual realm starts to gather weight. It often begins with the weight of every unspoken wound, words that were never defended, tears that were never acknowledged, moments of disrespect that were brushed aside. These things do not disappear. They settle, they wait. They rise when the appointed time arrives. And when they rise, the one who once took everything as a joke begins to feel pressure coming from places they cannot name. Older hearts, weary hearts, kind hearts know this feeling well. There comes a moment when the soul senses a change long before the eyes can confirm it. A strange stillness, a sense of holy tension in the air, and knowing deep within that something is about to unfold, and nothing will be the same afterward. For the narcissist, this moment arrives quietly. They do not see it. They do not expect it. They do not prepare for it. They simply begin to feel that their world is no longer cooperating with their pride. The ground beneath them feels less steady. The doors they forced open begin to resist. The people they controlled start slipping away. The jokes they made at others' expense no longer echo the same way. Something is coming. Something they never believed would come. Something that will demand their attention, even if they refuse to look. And in the next moment, the shaking will no longer be quiet. What does darkness do when it believes no one is watching? It grows bold. It grows confident. It moves freely, certain that its actions will never be revealed. This is the mindset of the narcissist who continues harming others as if their behavior is invisible. They convince themselves that charm can erase truth, that confidence can hide cruelty, and that arrogance can rewrite reality. But darkness is never as hidden as it believes. There comes a time when the very shadows a narcissist stands in begin to betray them. They think their pride shields them, yet pride is the very thing that blinds them. When someone walks through life believing no consequence can reach them, They fail to see how quickly the world around them begins to shift. The scriptures remind believers in the book of Luke, chapter 12, verse 2, that nothing concealed will remain hidden, and nothing secret will remain unknown. This is not spoken with anger or vengeance, but as a gentle warning that truth eventually rises. It may rise slowly, but it rises with purpose. And when it rises, even the proudest heart cannot silence it. Narcissists often underestimate this rising. They underestimate the people they hurt. They underestimate the quiet endurance of those who choose peace over revenge. They underestimate the power of the unseen world working in silence. While they laugh, while they dismiss, while they pretend that pain they caused is insignificant, a quiet shift begins to gather beneath their feet. There are moments in life when a person can sense this change long before it becomes visible. It can feel like a tension in the air, a heaviness without explanation, a silent message pressing gently on the heart. For the narcissist, this pressure begins to grow, but they interpret it as inconvenience, not consequence. Plans fall apart. Relationships weaken. Opportunities disappear. Their usual confidence feels thinner, weaker, less convincing. Their darkness begins to move in ways they cannot control. The lies they once used as armor start to feel heavy. The charm they relied on begins to lose its power. The mask they wore so easily starts to slip at the edges. Even the people who once admired them begin noticing inconsistencies, small fractures that cannot be ignored. But the greatest shift happens inside the narcissist themselves. The ease they once felt while causing pain becomes harder to maintain. The laughter they used to dismiss consequences grows quieter. There is a subtle awareness, an inner discomfort that whispers a truth they do not want to acknowledge. Something is watching. Something is shifting. Something is returning. And yet, they continue pretending that nothing is happening. They continue walking through the world as if their darkness cannot be seen. They continue believing that their actions are without weight, without effect, without consequence. But no darkness remains unchallenged forever. No cruelty goes unnoticed by heaven. No hidden intention stays buried in the shadows. And when the time arrives, the very darkness that once protected them begins revealing what they tried so hard to conceal. The shift has already begun. Have you ever watched someone build their life on illusions, only to realize that every foundation was weak? This is the reality for the narcissist. Every act of manipulation, every carefully constructed lie, every show of dominance is part of a throne built on sand. It may look solid to the world, but truth does not ignore instability. Eventually, the weight of reality presses down, and no false throne can endure forever. The narcissist walks through life as though the world owes them obedience. Every slight, every obedience, every admiration fuels a sense of invincibility. Yet their throne is not supported by wisdom, righteousness, or strength. It rests on fear, deception, and borrowed power. They believe authority comes from force and charm, from intimidation and control, from appearances rather than substance. But these are fragile supports. Luke chapter 16, verse 10 reminds that the person faithful in little is faithful in much, and the dishonest in little is dishonest in much. A life built on dishonesty will crumble, not because it is weak in the eyes of men, but because it defies the spiritual laws that govern the universe. The danger for the narcissist is that pride blinds them to every warning. A crack in a relationship seems trivial. A lost opportunity seems accidental. A mistrustful glance seems irrelevant. And yet, Each of these is a subtle signal from the unseen forces that govern justice. What they call coincidence, God calls consequence. What they call misunderstanding, God calls correction. What they call weakness in others, God calls patience preparing a moment that reveals everything. Their arrogance convinces them that they are untouchable. They fail to notice that every relationship they exploit, every trust they betray, every word they twist becomes part of a web that ultimately entangles them. They are building a trap around themselves, unaware that the very tools they use to dominate are forming the chain that will one day hold them accountable. Even the most cunning narcissist cannot escape the invisible pressure of truth. Pride becomes weighty, deception becomes unstable, and control becomes harder to maintain. The mask they rely on to impress the world begins to feel suffocating. They overcompensate with louder words, sharper attacks, more dramatic displays, but each action accelerates the inevitable collapse. The throne is unsteady, and every step shakes it further. Meanwhile, the quiet endurance of those they sought to control begins to rise. Patience, discernment, and faith are quietly strengthening against the narcissist's false authority. The truth, like a gentle but relentless tide, moves unseen yet unstoppable. And as it moves, the false throne they believed eternal begins to reveal its fragility. The cracks may appear small, at first a missed word, a faltering smile, a subtle hesitation, but these fractures deepen, and nothing that is built on deception can withstand the full weight of light. The narcissist may still laugh, still manipulate, still perform with confidence, but the foundation beneath them no longer supports the structure of lies. The time for illusions is ending. The false throne will not hold, no matter how clever the performance, how skilled the deception, or how many fear their wrath. And when it begins to crumble, there will be no place to hide. The moment the narcissist believed they had unlimited control is the very moment their downfall began. They treated every act of manipulation as cleverness, every lie as a tool to shape the world around them. They convinced themselves that their charm was invincible, that their deceit could never be seen through, that their power was permanent. But power built on falsehood is never true power. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 reminds us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What the narcissist never recognized is that divine eyes are always observing, and divine justice always acts, even when it appears silent. Your endurance, your patience, your quiet faithful, these small acts of trust in God, were laying the groundwork for the very unraveling they believed would never come. They pushed, they mocked, they dominated, believing no one could challenge them. Every soul they manipulated became a brick in the wall of their false kingdom. Every word of intimidation, every act of cruelty, every betrayal they thought had strengthened them. But these same bricks were already beginning to crumble. Arrogance blinds the soul. Pride clouds judgment. And the narcissist, intoxicated by their own illusion of superiority, never saw the cracks forming beneath them. Every deceit that once bent the world to their liking became a thread fraying under the weight of truth. Every relationship they used as a prop began to resist the pressure, creaking quietly, waiting for the moment of revelation. Meanwhile, in the quiet spaces of your spirit, God was preparing a reversal, not with spectacle, but with subtle, undeniable shifts. That sense of tension you felt in your heart, that quiet tightening in your soul, was the very presence of divine correction beginning to assert itself. Psalm 34 verse 18 reminds us, "The Lord is near to the broken-hearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Every attempt of the narcissist to dominate, to deceive, to twist reality, was already being counted, catalogued in the hands of the one who sees all. They could not perceive it, but their foundation was eroding, brick by brick, unnoticed because their pride blinded them to the smallest warning signs. They believed silence meant defeat, forgiveness meant weakness, and honesty meant naivety. But God was turning their ignorance into their trap. Every manipulation, every lie, every act of self-worship was already being measured against a higher law. And while they strutted in the illusion of power, the quiet work of divine justice was at hand, unseen but unstoppable. You could feel it too, like a wind stirring in the edges of your spirit. A gentle yet firm preparation for a reckoning that had been inevitable from the start. They do not yet understand, because arrogance always deceives. But soon, very soon, the world they crafted on falsehood will meet the light it cannot escape. And when it does, what once seemed unshakable will crumble. The narcissists believed their lies were permanent. They thought their charm was armor and their deceit was invisible. But truth is patient, and it always finds a way to surface. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 19 reminds us, truth stands forever. But a lie lasts only a moment. Every false word, every manipulation, every act of arrogance was creating a tension they could not see. A pressure that was quietly building until it could no longer be contained. They interpreted your silence as submission, your forgiveness as weakness, and your humility as ignorance, unaware that every act of grace you offered was a seed of spiritual strength. That same grace would be the very force that exposes them, though they will not see it coming. In the hidden corners of their heart, cracks were forming. The relationships they once exploited were shifting. People who relied on them or feared them began to sense the subtle tremors of instability. Their carefully crafted illusions of authority and control could not withstand the quiet, consistent pressure of truth. Every conversation, every interaction, every attempt to manipulate or dominate began to show signs of strain. Yet they continued, believing arrogance was strength and silence was invisibility. Pride, however, is blind, and when blind, it does not perceive the first signs of its own collapse. Meanwhile, your spirit began to awaken. You began to recognize patterns you once excused. The confusion that had clouded your heart started to lift. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 12 reminds us that the Word of God is living and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, discernment returned. You began to see the subtle manipulations, the empty gestures, the self-serving smiles. What once intimidated you now appeared fragile. What once seemed overwhelming now seemed temporary. God was quietly restoring clarity, and with that clarity came peace. The narcissist, on the other hand, was beginning to sense a shift they could not explain. The energy around them felt different. People stopped responding as they expected. Defenses grew unconsciously around those they once commanded. Their influence weakened, even though they could not name the reason. They increased their efforts, doubling down on lies, manipulation, and performance, yet every act of arrogance only revealed deeper cracks. The structure they built on deceit began to buckle, and while they scrambled to maintain the illusion, the foundations were already failing. The real danger for them was never in what you could do. It was in what God was doing. Every attempt to suppress your spirit, to control your perception, to dominate your truth, was being recorded by a higher power. Their strategies, once effective, now faltered. Their confidence began to wobble, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Pride, unchecked, cannot survive the careful, quiet work of justice. And slowly, inexorably, the unseen forces that measure heart and soul began dismantling their constructed world. The collapse of the narcissist begins quietly, like a shadow moving through a room, unnoticed until it takes over the entire space. They continue to perform, believing in the illusion of control, while the foundation beneath them deteriorates steadily. Every lie they told, every person they exploited, every act of cruelty now contributes to a spiritual pressure they cannot resist. Romans chapter 12, verse 19 says, "Do not avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord." Their downfall is not sudden. It has been building in silence, waiting for the precise moment when pride can no longer shield them. The narcissist feels this pressure subtly at first. Conversations feel heavier. Eyes once full of admiration now hold distance. Attempts to charm or intimidate no longer work as they expect. The structures of influence they relied upon begin to crack. They misinterpret these signs as challenges to overcome rather than warnings to heed. Arrogance convinces them that consequences belong to others, that judgment is delayed indefinitely. Yet every act of injustice, every deceit, every manipulation is a weight pressing against the walls of their false kingdom. Meanwhile, your spirit has been growing quietly stronger. Clarity replaces confusion. Your discernment sharpens. You begin to recognize patterns and motives you once excused. The peace within you is not fragile. It is rooted in the firm foundation of truth. You are no longer swayed by manipulation or fear. The light of understanding guides your decisions, strengthens your boundaries, and restores your soul. Every act of patience, every moment of prayer, every refusal to be drawn into their deception becomes a step toward freedom. The narcissist cannot see what is happening inside you. Their world shrinks even as yours expands. Their influence diminishes as your awareness grows. Their charm fades while your clarity strengthens. Their desperate attempts to maintain control become more visible, more erratic, more self. Every lie, every manipulation, every desperate effort to maintain dominance only accelerates the unraveling of their carefully constructed image. What destroys a narcissist is never simply losing control externally. It is the collapse that begins inside the trembling in the spirit. The recognition that their self-worship and deception no longer protect them. Their inner world cannot sustain the facade any longer. The emptiness they hid behind noise and manipulation begins to echo back, unrelenting and undeniable. This is spiritual destruction, not merely social consequence. It is the reckoning that comes when pride faces truth. The narcissist's sense of control, once unshakable, begins to feel slippery. Every manipulation that once worked flawlessly now falters. People who followed their lead, admired their charm, or feared their intimidation begin questioning, hesitating, stepping back. The subtle shift is almost imperceptible at first, but it spreads like a slow-moving shadow. Their lies start to contradict one another. Relationships they exploited for advantage begin to unravel. Those who once leaned on their dominance for guidance or protection now sense instability. The foundation of their influence is eroding, and the narcissist has no comprehension of the forces dismantling it. Meanwhile, your spirit continues its steady rise. Every observation, every act of endurance, every moment of patience has prepared you for this moment. You begin to see through the fog they cast over your life. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. You realize that the power you thought they held over you was always borrowed from fear, deception, and confusion, and it now loses its grip as clarity replaces uncertainty. The peace within you, previously fragile, now feels like bedrock. The narcissist, sensing something slipping beyond their control, increases the intensity of their efforts. They manipulate harder, lie louder, and project confidence with desperate force. But each act of aggression only exposes deeper cracks. Their attempts to dominate conversations, assert authority, or charm allies become increasingly strained, more visible, more awkward. What once seemed effortless now appears forced. Their mask begins to show the faintest signs of wear, but pride convinces them to keep performing. They cannot yet see that the performance itself is failing because it is built on deception and unsustainable arrogance. As the walls of their kingdom wobble, the internal pressure grows intolerable. They feel a weight pressing on their chest that cannot be dismissed. Their mind races, searching for a solution, yet every step they take seems to accelerate the collapse. Their anger spikes faster, reactions become erratic, and frustration seeps into every gesture. Every manipulation, every attempt at control, now rebounds against them. Those who were once instruments of their power no longer respond in predictable ways. Even allies begin to sense the fragility that the narcissist refuses to acknowledge. Your awareness of their unraveling is both liberating and profound. You no longer react to their provocations with fear or anxiety. Instead, you observe. You witness the consequences of their pride without being drawn into their chaos. You are anchored in discernment and wisdom. Every act of exposure, every crack in their facade, affirms the spiritual principles you've embraced. Integrity withstands deception. Humility prevails over arrogance, and truth cannot be suppressed indefinitely. As you remain steadfast, the narcissist's attempts to maintain dominance only further highlight the inevitability of their downfall. The narcissist has entered a stage where denial no longer suffices. Every interaction is strained. Every lie feels heavier than the last. Their inner world, once a controlled theater of manipulation and self-worship, trembles under the weight of unseen pressure. People around them sense it, even if they cannot articulate it. Friends hesitate, colleagues question, family members hold back. Their charm, once magnetic, now feels hollow, artificial. Their confidence is paper-thin, clinging desperately to illusions that are visibly unraveling. The narcissist's world is collapsing, and yet pride blinds them to the inevitability of the fall. Meanwhile, your clarity grows sharper. Every day, the fog lifts a little more. You recognize patterns and motives that once confused you. You no longer question your instincts. Every act of cruelty they committed, every manipulation they performed, is now visible in full perspective. You feel a surge of peace that is fierce and unwavering, rooted in spiritual understanding and divine protection. Isaiah 54:17 reminds us, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." And as you witness the unraveling of their schemes, you understand this truth on a deeply personal level. The peace inside you is not passive. It is a living force, standing firm as their world teeters. The narcissist, sensing exposure creeping closer, intensifies their control tactics. Lies are delivered with sharper precision, threats are veiled in charm, and the performance becomes frantic. But each effort only emphasizes the fragility of the facade. The cracks, once subtle, now widen, revealing the emptiness beneath. They cannot retreat, because retreat would mean admitting they were wrong. They cannot apologize, because that would destroy the carefully curated persona they worship. They continue performing, unaware that every act accelerates their collapse. Simultaneously, subtle signs of unraveling appear to the outside world. Conversations they once dominated now shift unexpectedly. People no longer respond automatically to flattery or intimidation. Allies pause, question, or withdraw, sensing instability. Their influence wanes not because of external attack, but because their foundation built on deception is cracking. The narcissist remains blind, believing the world still bends to their design. When in reality, the tides have shifted. Your position is one of strength. You are anchored in spiritual insight, discernment, and clarity. You no longer respond to fear, manipulation, or false authority. Their chaos no longer infiltrates your spirit. Every attempt to destabilize you falls flat. Instead of reacting, you witness. Instead of succumbing, you rise. Their unraveling is no longer a threat, it is proof of divine justice. A reminder that truth, patience, and perseverance ultimately prevail. The narcissist's collapse intensifies as exposure deepens. Every lie contradicts another. Every manipulation falters. Allies once loyal begin to withdraw, not out of rebellion, but because the subtle energy surrounding the narcissist signals instability. Pride, which fueled their perceived invincibility, now isolates them. Their carefully crafted kingdom of control begins crumbling silently, brick by brick. The illusion of strength they once wielded now becomes a trap, enclosing them in a self-created cage. Every attempt to maintain control only tightens the ropes of their own undoing. Your spirit, in contrast, continues rising. The discernment that God has restored within you allows you to see clearly the patterns of manipulation, the motives behind every false smile, and the emptiness that drives every act of cruelty. You are no longer ensnared by fear or confusion. Instead, you move with clarity and confidence, anchored in truth. Every step forward, every boundary you maintain, every refusal to participate in their drama, contributes to the dismantling of their power. While they scramble in desperation, you stand firm in divine protection. The narcissist attempts to compensate. They manipulate harder, lie faster, and escalate threats in a desperate bid to reclaim control. But the cracks are no longer cosmetic. They are structural. The walls of their kingdom, built on deception, cannot withstand the spiritual pressure closing in. Their words, once polished and persuasive, now betray anxiety, strain, and desperation. The mask they wore effortlessly for so long becomes suffocating. They struggle to reconcile their public image with the internal collapse they cannot deny. Simultaneously, the consequences of their pride extend outward. Relationships they exploited for advantage now shift into conflict or distance. Opportunities they counted on begin to vanish. People no longer defer to their authority. Instead, they step back, wary, aware, unconvinced by charm or intimidation. Their influence, once automatic, now requires effort that yields diminishing returns. The narcissist cannot comprehend why their world is falling apart. They assume it is coincidence rather than the inevitable outcome of deception and arrogance. In the quiet, however, you witness a different reality. You recognize divine orchestration in every unraveling, every misstep, every loss of influence. The shift is not random. It is precise, measured, and inevitable. The God who once strengthened your spirit now orchestrates the dismantling of the narcissist's kingdom. You are no longer the target of chaos. You are the observer of justice. The collapse, once hidden behind pride and manipulation, now becomes visible, undeniable, and irreversible. The narcissist's world continues to fracture under the weight of their own arrogance. Every lie, every manipulation, every scheme that once seemed untouchable now bends and twists in ways they cannot control. Their allies, once unquestioning, now hesitate, withdraw, or even confront. Every interaction carries a subtle tension, a quiet but undeniable sense that something has shifted. The mask of invincibility that they have relied upon for years is cracking, and with each crack, the reality they have so carefully avoided becomes harder to ignore. Meanwhile, your spirit stands firm. You have cultivated discernment, patience, and resilience that allow you to navigate the storm with unwavering clarity. Every observation of the narcissist's unraveling strengthens your understanding that pride, deception, and manipulation can only survive temporarily, and that truth has a way of asserting itself with relentless precision. You recognize that the chaos around you is not a reflection of your weakness, but a reflection of their impending consequences. Romans 8:28 becomes vivid in your heart. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. You understand that the seemingly random missteps, exposures, and setbacks of the narcissist are part of a divine orchestration. The narcissist senses the shift. They react with escalating, intensity louder lies, more dramatic manipulations, desperate attempts to regain authority. But each move is counterproductive, exposing further vulnerabilities. Their actions no longer command respect or fear. They generate skepticism, resistance, and distance. People who once deferred now question, challenge, or quietly remove themselves from the chaos. The narcissist, blinded by pride, interprets the consequences as obstacles to overcome rather than signs of an inevitable collapse. They cannot see that every reaction only accelerates their downfall. Even their internal world begins to betray them. Anxiety, guilt, and frustration simmer beneath the surface, and every attempt to suppress these feelings only amplifies their visible tension. Small mistakes that once would have been overlooked now feel catastrophic to them. Every encounter, conversation, or interaction becomes a test they are failing without realizing it. The stability they relied on for their psychological control is slipping like sand through their fingers. Your awareness, however, continues to be your strength. You do not react impulsively or seek revenge. You maintain composure, knowing that the universe or God's justice is orchestrating the dismantling of the narcissist's carefully constructed world. You observe, you discern, and you maintain boundaries with unwavering consistency. You realize that the most powerful response is not confrontation, but steadfast presence and spiritual clarity. Each time the narcissist lashes out or manipulates, it only highlights the inevitability of their destruction and your unshakable foundation. As the narcissist struggles, the patterns of their undoing become increasingly visible. Every tactic, every manipulation that once worked flawlessly now backfires. The people around them, once enablers or pawns, begin to resist or distance themselves. Even casual acquaintances sense instability, a subtle energy that cannot be faked or ignored. The narcissist continues to act as if everything is under control, but internally, chaos is spreading like wildfire. Their every step forward seems to deepen the cracks rather than close them. Your perception, in contrast, is crystal clear. You see the connections, the motives, the patterns, and the consequences. You are no longer ensnared by confusion, fear, or doubt. Every step of patience and discernment you have taken has prepared you to witness this collapse with clarity and strength. You are anchored in truth, divine protection, and spiritual insight. Psalm 91:1-2 comes alive. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. The narcissist may lash, manipulate, and threaten, but they cannot touch the foundation of your spirit. The narcissist's frantic efforts escalate. Lies are louder, threats sharper, and manipulations more desperate. But each effort exposes deeper vulnerabilities, showing the world the fragility behind the facade. Their charm, once magnetic, now feels hollow and forced. Their attempts at dominance create tension instead of compliance. Allies, friends, and colleagues notice, and the subtle energy of collapse spreads through every interaction. Their credibility erodes, leaving them isolated, frustrated, and blind to the inevitability of what's happening. Internally, the narcissist begins to experience panic. Small mistakes that previously would have gone unnoticed now loom like catastrophes. Their perception of control is replaced by anxiety, paranoia, and an insatiable need to assert dominance. But every attempt to regain authority only accelerates the unraveling. Their world, once rigidly ordered according to their ego, begins to collapse from within. Every strategy they employ to maintain power rebounds against them, eroding influence and exposing vulnerability. Meanwhile, your position remains one of observation and strength. You maintain spiritual and emotional boundaries while watching the narcissist's self-destruction unfold. You do not need to act or intervene. The consequences of their arrogance and deception unfold naturally. Your life, grounded in integrity and discernment, contrasts sharply with the chaos consuming them. You are witnessing not just downfall, but divine justice, orchestrated with precision and inevitability. The narcissist now faces a profound reality. Their previous tactics no longer yield results. The web of lies, manipulation, and deception that once supported them is unraveling faster than they can comprehend. Allies, once loyal or intimidated, begin questioning their credibility. Former friends hesitate, colleagues pull back, and even family members recognize the dissonance between the persona they present and the instability they exude. The narcissist feels the pressure mounting, yet cannot fully perceive the forces dismantling their control. You, in contrast, continue to rise in clarity, insight, and spiritual strength. Every act of patience, every moment of discernment, and every boundary you've maintained has prepared you for this moment. You understand that their collapse is not an accident, it is the inevitable result of arrogance, deception, and refusal to face truth. You feel a profound sense of peace, rooted not in revenge, but in observation and divine understanding. Proverbs 21:30 reminds us, there is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord, and you witness this truth as their carefully constructed world begins to fall apart. The narcissist escalates, increasing manipulation, threats, and lies, but the effect is now counterproductive. Their attempts at control highlight their fragility instead of authority. People respond not with fear, but with caution or withdrawal. Friends who once mirrored their behavior now quietly disengage. Authority figures who once complied now question, challenge, or avoid involvement. The narcissist, blinded by ego and pride, misinterprets every setback as temporary rather than an inevitable consequence. Internally, the pressure grows unbearable. Anxiety, frustration, and paranoia dominate their thoughts. Every misstep feels catastrophic. Every interaction whether personal or professional, now carries the weight of consequences they cannot manage. Their internal world, once a theater of dominance and control, becomes a cage of fear and instability. Their pride prevents acknowledgement of the unraveling. But each action, each manipulation, each lie only accelerates the collapse. You, however, maintain composure. Your spirit is grounded, your perception sharp, and your boundaries unwavering. You do not need to intervene or retaliate. The narcissist's destruction unfolds as a natural consequence of their choices. Every failed manipulation, every contradiction, every loss of influence serves as a visible confirmation that truth, integrity, and divine order ultimately prevail over deception and pride. You, however, maintain composure. Your spirit is grounded, your perception sharp, and your boundaries unwavering. You do not need to intervene or retaliate. The narcissist's destruction unfolds as a natural consequence of their choices. Every failed manipulation, every contradiction, every loss of influence serves as a visible confirmation that truth, integrity, and divine order ultimately prevail over deception and pride. By now, the narcissist is in a state of relentless panic. Every tactic that once ensured compliance and admiration now rebounds, exposing weakness and igniting suspicion. Their network of influence of people they manipulated, charmed, or intimidated is dissolving. Each connection they counted on for power now acts independently, quietly removing themselves from the chaos or confronting the truth. The narcissist's sense of control, once absolute, has become an illusion they can no longer sustain. You remain grounded. Your resilience is rooted in years of discernment, careful observation, and spiritual clarity. You recognize that the unraveling is not random but inevitable, dictated by the natural consequences of their arrogance and manipulation. Every interaction you witness reinforces your understanding. Deception cannot withstand scrutiny, pride cannot survive exposure, and the truth always finds its way. Psalm 34:17-18 resonates strongly in your heart. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The narcissist may seem untouchable, but the divine law of cause and effect is now in motion. Their behavior becomes increasingly erratic. Desperation drives them to extreme measures, attempts at intimidation, manipulation, and diversion, but each effort only magnifies their vulnerability. Lies are exposed with greater speed, contradictions are undeniable, and the very persona they cultivated as a shield now becomes a source of ridicule and suspicion. Colleagues, friends, and family start recognizing the pattern, noticing how every narrative is designed to benefit the narcissist at the expense of truth. Their charm falters under scrutiny. Their authority diminishes with each failed attempt at control. Internally, anxiety dominates the narcissist's thoughts. Their pride prevents them from admitting fault, but their instinctive awareness of impending failure gnaws at them constantly. Sleepless nights, obsessive planning, and irrational anger replace calm confidence. Every misstep becomes monumental, and every interaction is a potential threat to their fragile image. Their identity, previously constructed on control and admiration, begins to crumble. Meanwhile, you maintain vigilance and composure. You observe the narcissist's downfall without distraction or involvement, allowing the natural consequences of their choices to unfold. You do not retaliate. You do not seek revenge. Instead, you remain anchored in clarity and discernment, observing a pattern of cause and effect that is both inevitable and instructive. Every failure of the narcissist serves as a confirmation of your spiritual and emotional boundaries, reinforcing your understanding that integrity, patience, and faith will always endure where deception and arrogance collapse. Have you ever watched someone build their life on illusions, only to realize that every foundation was weak? This is the reality for the narcissist. Every act of manipulation, every carefully constructed lie, every show of dominance is part of a throne built on sand. It may look solid to the world, but truth does not ignore instability. Eventually, the weight of reality presses down, and no false throne can endure forever. The narcissist walks through life as though the world owes them obedience. Every slight, every obedience, every admiration fuels a sense of invincibility. Yet their throne is not supported by wisdom, righteousness, or strength. It rests on fear, deception, and borrowed power. They believe authority comes from force and charm, from intimidation and control, from appearances rather than substance. But these are fragile supports. Luke chapter 16, verse 10 reminds that the person faithful in little is faithful in much, and the dishonest in little is dishonest in much. A life built on dishonesty will crumble, not because it is weak in the eyes of men, but because it defies the spiritual laws that govern the universe. The danger for the narcissist is that pride blinds them to every warning. A crack in a relationship seems trivial. A lost opportunity seems accidental. A mistrustful glance seems irrelevant. And yet, each of these is a subtle signal from the unseen forces that govern justice. What they call coincidence, God calls consequence. What they call misunderstanding, God calls correction. What they call weakness in others, God calls patience preparing a moment that reveals everything. Their arrogance convinces them that they are untouchable. They fail to notice that every relationship they exploit, every trust they betray, every word they twist becomes part of a web that ultimately entangles them. They are building a trap around themselves, unaware that the very tools they use to dominate are forming the chain that will one day hold them accountable. Even the most cunning narcissist cannot escape the invisible pressure of truth. Pride becomes weighty, deception becomes unstable, and control becomes harder to maintain. The mask they rely on to impress the world begins to feel suffocating. They overcompensate with louder words, sharper attacks, more dramatic displays, but each action accelerates the inevitable collapse. The throne is unsteady, and every step shakes it further. Meanwhile, the quiet endurance of those they sought to control begins to rise. Patience, discernment, and faith are quietly strengthening against the narcissist's false authority. The truth, like a gentle but relentless tide, moves unseen yet unstoppable. And as it moves, the false throne they believed eternal begins to reveal its fragility. The cracks may appear small, at first a missed word, a faltering smile, a subtle hesitation, but these fractures deepen, and nothing that is built on deception can withstand the full weight of light. The narcissist may still laugh, still manipulate, still perform with confidence, but the foundation beneath them no longer supports the structure of lies. The time for illusions is ending. The false throne will not hold, no matter how clever the performance, how skilled the deception, or how many fear their wrath. And when it begins to crumble, there will be no place to hide. The narcissist is now isolated. Their allies have withdrawn, colleagues have become wary, and friends who once supported them now question their motives. The web of control they spun for years unravels in real time, leaving them exposed to consequences they cannot manipulate or avoid. The sense of invincibility they once relied upon has disappeared, replaced by constant fear, frustration, and paranoia. Each new day brings setbacks, exposure, and an undeniable reality. Their empire of lies is collapsing. Your position, in stark contrast, is one of observation, peace, and discernment. You are no longer entangled in their chaos. You witness the dismantling of their power with clarity and understanding. Each failure they endure reinforces the lessons you have learned about boundaries, truth, and spiritual resilience. You recognize the inevitability of justice, both human and divine, and you remain unwavering in your faith and integrity. Isaiah 54:17 comes to mind. No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is not a victory born of revenge, but a reflection of natural consequences aligning with divine order. The narcissist escalates out of desperation. Their manipulations become more obvious, their lies more transparent, and their attempts to control those around them increasingly transparent. Their charm is now hollow, their threats empty. Every interaction reinforces the perception of instability, and every attempt to dominate or deceive strengthens the awareness of others that something is deeply wrong. Isolation, once unthinkable, becomes unavoidable. They face the terrifying realization that their tactics cannot sustain them any longer. Inside, their mind is a battlefield of anxiety and rage. Pride prevents them from acknowledging reality, yet instinct reveals the unraveling. Every encounter carries potential exposure. Every move carries risk. The narcissist becomes trapped in a cycle of frantic attempts to regain control, each effort intensifying the consequences. Their world, once meticulously curated to project authority and success, now feels like a collapsing house of cards, with no structural support remaining. Meanwhile, you maintain boundaries and composure. You do not intervene or react impulsively. Your awareness allows you to witness the dismantling of the narcissist's control without being consumed by the chaos. You see the lessons in action, that deception collapses under scrutiny, that pride destroys itself when left unchecked, and that integrity endures. This is not a moment of triumph over an adversary. It is a revelation of natural order, a demonstration that actions always have consequences, and a confirmation that faith, patience, and discernment create resilience that cannot be shaken by external chaos. The final stage of the narcissist's collapse is unmistakable. Every attempt at control fails, every manipulation backfires, and every lie becomes a tool that exposes them further. Their previous sphere of influence, friends, colleagues, family, and allies, has contracted dramatically, leaving them alone in a world that no longer responds to fear, charm, or deception. The walls of their carefully constructed identity are crumbling, leaving only vulnerability and exposure. They are confronted with a reality they can no longer ignore. Their choices have consequences, and the universe will enforce them with precision. You stand apart, unwavering, your life, rooted in integrity, discernment, and spiritual strength, contrasts sharply with the unraveling of the narcissist. You have maintained boundaries, observed patterns, and cultivated resilience that now allow you to watch without fear or engagement. Every consequence the narcissist faces is evidence that truth cannot be suppressed indefinitely, and that the natural order, divine or otherwise, will restore balance. James 1:12 resonates. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him. Your endurance and faith have positioned you to witness this final reckoning with clarity and peace. The narcissist's behavior becomes increasingly erratic. Each interaction is a miscalculation, each manipulation a failure, Former allies now act openly against them, exposing lies and contradictions. Attempts at intimidation fall flat. The once dominant persona has become a caricature of its former self, generating skepticism, ridicule, and distance rather than compliance or admiration. Their sense of control, which defined their identity for years, is now gone, leaving them to confront the consequences alone. Internally, the narcissist experiences a profound sense of panic. Anxiety, fear, and frustration dominate every thought. Pride prevents acknowledgement of responsibility, yet instinct reveals the collapse. Every decision is reactive, impulsive, and counterproductive, accelerating the destruction. They are left with the stark realization that their power was an illusion, their influence temporary, and their identity fragile. You maintain your position, steady and composed. You do not gloat, intervene, or seek revenge. You recognize that the dismantling of the narcissist's power is both inevitable and necessary, a lesson in cause and effect. Pride and humility, deception and truth. Witnessing the collapse reinforces your understanding that integrity, patience, faith, and discernment are the ultimate safeguards against manipulation and chaos. The narcissist has faced unexpected destruction, but your steadfastness has ensured that you remain untouched, anchored in truth, and spiritually fortified.